Today, with our special guest, we're going to be discussing contraceptives as we watch our culture stray further. What you believe about God dictates how you will think. Our philosophies dictate how our culture behaves. Politics is simply the enforcement of cultural norms. The truth claims about God, philosophy, culture, and policies will affect what we value. When these things are in alignment, revival is possible. Well, hello there, and welcome to Further Every Day, the podcast where we explore current events through the Christian lens. However, today, once again, we are joined by a audience favorite, Dr. Flower. How are you this morning?
Doing well.
Glad to have you on.
It's fun to be here.
So it's going to be an interesting topic today. But going around the room, I just want to introduce everyone, and then let's get into the nitty-gritty. We have a full studio this morning. In the chair of Theology, we have Miss Nikki this morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Dealing with the reason why we believe what we believe, the Bible itself today. Looking forward to it. To her left, we got Josh.
Hello, good morning. And I want to redeem myself real quick. Good morning, Dr. Flower. If you noticed, I didn't put an S on the end of that.
Excellent.
There's only one, but there needs to be more.
There you go. There's only one Dr. Flower, but if we could clone her, well, that would be some other ethical issues. But maybe we'll talk about that in a different podcast. Moving over to his left, we have Melissa. How are you?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing well. Glad to have you on. In the chair of culture, Josh in the chair of philosophy. And then, of course, we got Dr. Flower sitting here in our guest chair. And glad to have you there. And to her left, we've got Mr. Steve. How are you, sir?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. Doing fantastic today, John Arthur.
Glad to have you in the chair of politics. I think his gate is up there. Miss Producer, you might want to reduce the threshold. Thank you so much. And then, of course, yours truly sitting in the chair of economics. As often is the case, let's get into it. I want to get Dr. Flower's take, though, first. For people like me of the male persuasion and a lot of others, sometimes contraception can kind of be a bit of a gray box or a black box. You don't necessarily understand everything there is to understand here, but what are some of the different types of contraceptives? Mechanically, what do they do? What happens when someone goes on, quote unquote, the pill versus a physical implant? Dr. Flower.
Okay, so I've got to do about a 3-hour talk in 5 minutes. Okay. So just to sum up, there's natural contraception, which is when the woman detects when she's ovulating, and that's done with temperature and also cervical mucus. So the family or the husband and wife would plan not to have intercourse about 7 days around that time, so that because sperm lives 7 days. So that would be natural contraception, very quickly summarized. Barrier contraception, there's a number of those. One, the male is responsible for, and that's the condom. The others are, the other one that's fairly popular, or used to be anyway, is a diaphragm, which the woman has to put a spermicide in the diaphragm and insert it in the vagina. So the children should not be listening to this lecture. Anyway.
Quick disclaimer.
So those are the two most common types of barrier contraception. Hormonal contraception gets into a whole line of different things because it includes oral contraceptives as well as implants, as well as IUDs. So in all three of those can contain mostly a progesterone that is designed to prevent ovulation. The birth control pill has an estrogen type of chemical and a progesterone type of chemical, and that's supposed to, ideally, is designed to prevent ovulation. The truth is that it doesn't always do that. So you can't. So that's one of the reasons that women get pregnant on the birth control pill. The birth control pill has to be taken every day, and so And then they've been designed for a long time. It was just 21 days, and then you'd stop for 7 and then start again at 21. And that was really hard for people to remember. So they started adding like a sugar pill or an iron pill for those 7 days to be off the hormones and then start again, so that the woman would have a period every cycle. There's another one that that you take for 3 months, just straight, and have no menses, and then have a menses. So it's fairly safe physiologically. If a woman has a menses every 3 months, that's still safe medically. The problem with the birth control pill, that if somebody would actually read the package insert, the doctors usually don't say anything to the woman about the fact that it can increase the risk of breast cancer. And so in someone who, especially that has a family history of breast cancer, they probably shouldn't take hormonal contraceptives, especially the birth control pill. The other problem that's worse with the birth control pill, although some of the oral birth control pills are just progesterone, if you just have the progesterone component, you're not as at much risk for blood clots. But with both, it's even higher. Women who smoke, because they already have a higher risk of blood clots, at a higher risk if they use a contraception, a hormonal contraceptive. The implants that are put, the most common one is, I think it may be the only one that's available right now, is Norplant, and that's put into the skin under the arm. So it's a medical procedure and then it lasts for 3 years and then has to be removed. And then if someone wants it again, it has to be redone. And then there are IUDs. That's an intrauterine device, is what IUD stands for. The intrauterine device works a little differently. You can have one that has a hormone in it that actually prevents the lining of the uterus from building up, so that it would not be very good to receive an embryo. So the embryo just would pass. It also affects the cervical mucus, and that's the same for the oral contraceptives. And one is a mechanical one, and the hormonal ones prevent the lining from building up.
So let me just ask you a quick question.
Okay.
So just for the audience members who didn't catch that, you said embryo. You're not talking about preventing a sperm and an egg from meeting. You're talking about an embryo, not implanting.
Right.
Okay. So
an IUD is a little bit different. The ones that have the hormones do tend to prevent the ovulation, so you would be less likely to have fertilization. But the IUD does prevent the implantation in most cases. There have been cases of babies born with IUDs in their hands, so that's not 100% either. The only 100% form of contraception that I know of is abstinence.
So let's go ahead and break all of that down, because there's a huge amount that we just put out there. Like you said, 2 hours and 5 minutes. Thank you for bearing with us. There's like a lot there. But what I understand from that is that there are hormonal preventives. However, some of those can potentially deny implantation for a human life in the uterine wall. IUDs by nature do this, and stop me if I'm wrong. So there's a risk with some of these that we could actually be in the process of abortion in some cases. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct, which is one of the arguments against even oral contraceptives, is the concern that at times you may be causing a very early abortion and not knowing it, of course. So that's one of the arguments. Some scientists really argue against that and say, oh, that never happens, or that, again, that it's rare. So morally, some folks, especially the Catholic Church, that's why they don't agree with oral contraceptives or IUDs. A couple of other problems is that the oral contraceptives do make the cervix more prone to infection, so there's increased risk for gonorrhea and chlamydia on the birth control pill, which a lot of people, and so that we haven't even gotten into that because none of these, except for condoms and possibly a little bit the diaphragms, do anything to prevent sexually transmitted disease, and which is one of the problems that especially developed after contraceptions was available. There's more STIs, and believe it or not, people still die from sexually transmitted diseases, even in this day and age.
So let's go ahead and start to break this down by the chairs, because there is a ton of information. I know, Chair of Theology, you've got some questions for Dr. Flower. I'd like you to start off with some of the telos and the purpose, and just from your chair.
Well, I guess what I would be addressing here as a Christian is the purpose to prevent a birth of a child for a Christian, and everybody has their own reasons, but I guess I would ask you more in the sense of your opinion about a couple coming to a point and saying, okay, I think we're done. I think we've our quiver's full now, and we're going to stop having children. What do you see? Is that a contradiction for any biblical purpose that you see?
So, I think it could be argued that we're told to be fruitful and multiply. So the fact that sometimes the fact that you're able to do something doesn't necessarily make it something that you should do. But of course, in this day and age, something like permanent sterilization, whether it's the male or the female, that the woman could have her tubes tied or the man could have a vasectomy, that may be something that's reasonable, especially if they're getting older, and which increases the risk of not just Down syndrome, but multiple births. That might be something that would be at least a consideration, in the sense that when you have permanent sterilization, you're not causing an abortion. Right. So it's you have to weigh those things. But biblically speaking, I don't know. So now I know that the verse, a wise man foreseeth evil and hideth himself. So if as a woman has multiple births, the chances for there to be more problems increases with every birth. Is that correct? After like 6 or 7 children. Yeah. It's called a grand multipra after 6. Yeah, and so in that case, when a woman is looking physically like this might be coming to a point where it's a good idea, I maybe need to take precaution to have any more children. In old times, before birth control, when a woman got to that point, what was the only option that her and her husband had? It would have been natural birth control. So contraception, though, has been around for thousands of years. So it's not really anything new. It was just done and practiced in different ways. They didn't have the hormones, and they didn't have IUDs, although they used sort of like IUDs in camels. I know that. So
that's wild.
So they knew about it. So and that was putting a rock in the they would put a rock in the uterus. Yeah. So I mean, the IUD type of thing was known for a long time, at least in animals. I don't know if they ever tried it in humans, but so birth control pill has been the birth control itself has been around for a long time. So it's not really anything new. Permanent birth control is relatively new.
Right, right. So I guess I just would, I know it's a very controversial subject within the religious community. And I'm not sure, and maybe I'm not sure there's a very clear directive biblically for everybody to do the same, go to the same path.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to add in something on that chair. What chances or percentage, you've already said we don't know, but is there any estimate or ballpark on how many, where does the probability go up that if you're on the hormonal or the IUD, that you are actually committing an abortive procedure on a somewhat regular basis? What are the chances of that? 1%, 2%?
I don't know a percentage. The IUD would be the main one, so that'd be probably something like 90%. With the birth control pill, it would be different, because if you actually are preventing ovulation, which can be argued that you're not, then it would be less. Some of the birth control pills actually tend to increase ovulation, and
wow.
I don't know which ones those are, but they tend to. So one of the arguments is that the abortion clinics prescribe those so that they can do more abortions. The other thing that we haven't mentioned is that in our culture, for a long time, and probably will continue, abortion has been used for birth control.
Infanticide. Actually, the cult of Moloch was in a lot of ways that way. You were sending your kids through the fire so that you didn't have to deal with them. And but that's a whole different topic. This feathers really well into the chair of philosophy. I know you've got some questions there, Josh. The chair of philosophy, go ahead and pose some questions to her.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that this is one of those topics that I am woefully uninformed on. And so this podcast is a great introduction for me. And just hearing your responses have already been a great asset to my knowledge on this subject. Because prior to this, my only knowledge was really birth control pill and prophylactics. And so this has been really, really informative. But I do have some questions for you, Dr. Flower, singular.
But I'm not single.
No, not at all, not at all. So when we look at what Miss Nikki said, where, we're called to be fruitful and multiply, but there comes a point potentially where it becomes a health risk after 6 for the woman. It can be a challenging ordeal, this topic. But as it pertains to contraception, does it always work? No,
it absolutely does not always work. So especially barrier contraception, and I didn't mention things like spermicides, or I briefly did, but so there's are things used to just kill the sperm. But anyway, that's the deal, is that it has a failure rate. They all do, and hence abortion came into being used for birth control. The other one is the morning after pill, which is just very, very high birth control pills, actually. And what they do is prevent implantation. So, but there's an argument there. When you look at so think about this. When the chances of the sperm and egg meeting and then becoming a human being are something like 1, and being born, all that healthy, is like 1 in 20 billion. So if you think about it like that, and you understand that the chances of a full-term pregnancy are that slim, then that puts it so much in the realm of God's hands, whether or not somebody is born. Think about examples in the Bible. I think it was Hagar, that it was either Hagar or Tamar. I can't remember which one. That her husband died, and then then the son, the brother was supposed. Who was it?
It was Tamar.
It was Tamar.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the brothers kept on excuse me, doing a form of contraception, which was to spill the sperm outside of the woman, and they all died. And then we managed to have her father-in-law, impregnates her, and that she's in the line of Christ. So, it's like God has a plan, and we have our plans, and our plans don't always succeed, but his plan does.
And you're so on the money. By the way, passage that she's referencing, Genesis 38, if you wanna go there. I didn't even think about that. You're so right there. That is a great passage. And I think what you just answered there on the back end was going to be my next question. It was, what is the purpose of procreation? And when you were talking about the legacy that you leave, that's something that they don't tell you when you take the contraception. That's something that they won't tell you when you get that abortive procedure, is the fact that not only do you have this beautiful gift of this child, but you also are going to be leaving a legacy through this child. And it's a lot of responsibility, but it's worth it. And I think the Lord tells us it's worth it. And so that was awesome. I didn't even think about that. Genesis, that's a great. That's awesome.
So,
Can I interject real quick here?
Go ahead.
Just to build on what he was saying, is in Genesis where it talked about raising up seed for your brother, and they didn't want to do that. But I think there's the question of why you don't want to have children. I mean, is it I don't want any children, or I don't want any more children? And I think that's a really, I think it's controversial, number one, but I think it's important. An important question is, we're done having children, or I want to break between this child and that child, or I just never want any kids. So, there's a lot going on here, and a lot of things you can't address in 1 hour. True.
It was, I think one of the things we talked about last time with abortion was the economics related to it. I remember that. And so that might be one of the things that scares people a lot, is like, oh, if I have this many children, it's going to be really economically a burden. But then, like I said, go listen to the last podcast. Dr. Flower, I think, answers that question very well.
And we'll definitely hit on that today, because there's a tail end issue with that people don't realize. But do you have any other questions, Chair of Philosophy, or should I shift to the Chair of Culture?
I say let's shift to the Chair of Culture.
Let's go to the Chair of Culture.
I'll be real. I think Dr. Flower answered that question beautifully.
I think she did. So, Chair of Culture, Melissa, I know you've got questions.
Yes. So what happens to the culture when people are free from the product of procreation with children via contraception?
Well, there's another way to think about that, and that is and it covers all of the things that we've been talking for this podcast and the other one that I did on abortion.
It's early in the morning.
Yeah. And that is, if everyone practiced I'm just going to say the sexual morality of Jesus Christ, what would the world look like? Not just what he practiced himself, but also what he preached. So, of course, he practiced abstinence and did not get married, because that would have raised a lot of other theological questions if he had done that. But then he also preached about being married to one wife, right, and to not have sexual intercourse before marriage. So think about that. I'm just trying to get around to answer. It's hard. This is a hard question to answer, but it's just that we would have no fatherlessness, right? technically.
Amen.
I mean, there wouldn't be the question of a single mom raising a child except if something had happened to her husband. So that would be a lot less. None of these, the abortion probably wouldn't be an issue. It could have been, but generally not. So there's just a whole lot of issues. And then the men and women that would theoretically be raised in a family, would leave a better legacy than raised without an intact family. So our culture has changed our thinking and our ability to raise children and about children, whereas in some cases children are just worshipped in a sense. Someone has a child and they give them everything, but then sometimes they say, well, I don't want to have any more because I've given everything I have to this one. And then on the other hand, they're an inconvenience. So it's a very, it's really hard to put your finger on what the answer to that is, because it's a very broad question in a sense.
So I've got one thing to jump in, if I may, on the chair culture, because you had back in the 1920s and 30s, all the way up until we started to see more contraception, 40s, etc., we saw a lot of, and again, I don't have the stat in front of me, but you saw a lot of 8-month babies. Before contraception was widely available, you saw a lot of babies that showed up 8 months into the marriage.
Oh.
We called these shotgun weddings, because if you do the crime, you have to do the time. And so I just want to push this back over to you ladies to discuss in just a moment. But you look at that culture where at least where there was sin, there was a chance for a whole family unit. Now you have, and by the way, on the cultural note, just the hilarious stuff I've seen about women writing up contracts about the man supporting the child and doing whatever if they have sex and they somehow are not able to abort the child. We have a contract for that, ladies. It's called marriage. It's called marriage. That's been invented, but there's a lot of people on the left who are starting to say, "Oh, if I can't prevent a pregnancy, this guy has to be responsible." I'm going to shove that back over to y'all. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Because again, y'all are both of the fairer sex. What should men be doing in the culture as far as taking responsibility? What have we seen a lack of since the contraception?
The lack of commitment. So a guy can have sex whenever he wants, theoretically, and the way our culture is dealing with that right now is the woman has to really fight to get the father of the child to be responsible for that child, whereas that's not a big issue when they're married. The other cool thing, though, I don't know how many y'all probably know couples where the woman has become pregnant by someone else marries her, and I've even known where they've married her when she's pregnant, and raised that child as their own, or adopt or after birth adopt the child. So we've got kind of a dual thing happening in our culture. It's more common, though, for the male to just not be responsible.
Quite funny when, which is you're saying is right, when a woman becomes pregnant and she fights for, an unmarried woman fights for the financial support of the man, but the man has no say in the abortion.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. And some men are really complaining about that. When in fact, I think I mentioned last time, when my daughter was in college, the guy that she sat next to in one of her classes committed suicide when he found out that his girlfriend had an abortion. So men, we kind of don't let them enter into that. And it should be. Men need to be allowed to. There have been men that have gone to abortion clinics trying to get their girlfriend not to have the abortion. So this notion, my body, my choice, is not. It's not only the woman involved in this, in becoming pregnant. She can't do it by herself.
That's right. That's right.
So kind of on that lines of my body, my choice. So does my body, my choice also apply to contraceptive where, as a woman, I might want to take it, but a guy that I'm, potentially could be marrying, he could say, no, you're off of it. So does that, the guy wants that choice for the baby, but does he also have that choice for contraception as well?
So, I think it would be harder to justify that outside of marriage. Within marriage, you would think that the father would have just as much say as the woman, but that's not always the case.
And it could also work the opposite way, that the guy wants the woman to
Yes.
be on it and the woman does not.
Yes, so that does happen.
Yeah.
And so see, some of these dilemmas that we have now are related occur because of what we can do. This wasn't always the case. And so because we can,
Right.
do some of these things, then it can become a dilemma.
It was never part of the conversation years
Right.
ago.
Right.
So, if the chair of culture has asked, all the questions on the list, I want to make sure I give you a chance. If you've got everything there, I'm going to move over to the chair of politics.
Ooh.
So, I know that you have some questions about
Yes.
entitlements regarding
Yes,
this.
I do. Now, entitlements for contraception have been proposed by some on the left. How should the Christian articulate a response?
Actually, it's already pretty much in existence because of the free clinics that are available. And then there's even in Texas, we have Medicaid that's just women's health. So we already provide an avenue for women to get that as part of their health care if they want to have contraceptives. And not only oral contraceptives, but also IUDs and the shot, the progesterone shot, or the implant. So it's essentially already available.
So that kind of goes in the face of the whole Hobby Lobby bit that happened. It was 2014, 2015 with Obamacare, or was it 2013?
As far as insurance goes.
As far as insurance and providing contraceptives and insurance.
So one of the deals with Obamacare is that men were also paying for that and also paying for being pregnant. So that was one of the issues with that. Plus, if you have a moral objection to providing that kind of care, it isn't saying that. Again, in our culture, it's not saying that it's totally unavailable, but it is. I don't know that it was really looked into that deeply with so women who can afford medical care can get contraception, and if they can't, then there's already provision for them in general.
Now, I know you mentioned the effects of some of the oral contraceptives on those that have a history of, say, like breast cancer.
Right.
But let's say women who don't necessarily have that kind of history or may have histories of other things, what are the kinds of long-term effects, like women who might start, younger, say like when they're teens and go on into their 30s taking oral contraceptives, like maybe 20 years or so, and they're taking these?
So some of the concern would be some of them then discover that they can't become pregnant. So there is a concern of decreased fertility when you use contraception, hormonal contraception for a long time. And there can be complications for even an IUD. With an IUD, you have a little bit increased risk of sexually transmitted disease, which again, if you're on oral contraceptives, you're not being protected from that. So many of the STIs affect fertility, can cause damage to the womb and mostly to the tubes, so that they're blocked, and then the woman cannot become pregnant. So someone who's on like oral contraceptives for a long time could actually be decreasing their fertility, among other things.
So let's say informed consent, is it really being obtained by all who use it?
So not really. So it's just, that's usually just basically seen as as either a medical procedure for an insertion of an IUD or prescribing a medication. So it's just all of the side effects of these things are not usually talked about. So I can tell you what I did in my private practice. In my private practice, I don't think I was really aware of the breast cancer part of birth control pill until someone called my attention to it. But I would not prescribe birth control pills to unmarried people. Even had an issue one time with somebody from the hospital where I was working, a couple that wanted me to, prescribe birth control pills, and they weren't married. And I'm like, sorry, but I can't see you for that. So that was hard. So I did prescribe them to married couples. I didn't do IUDs because of the, I did probably in residency because I didn't know that much about it, and learned how to do it, how to put those in, but didn't do it after I was in practice because of the understanding of the potential for causing an abortion, and also from the increased risk of infection. So I think that's...
Now, I might be stepping on the toes of the culture chair here, but I know that there are times when a mother might prescribe it for, say, like a teenager to control their period for younger women. Is that like really a good idea?
So actually, I will do that if there's not another way to deal with it, but usually only temporarily, not as a continuous thing. So for a few months, the exposure to the hormones is certainly not as bad, or not as doesn't cause as many complications if you're just doing it for a short period of time. Mm-hmm. I had mothers coming in wanting me to prescribe the birth control pill for their daughters to keep them from getting pregnant. And I would go in and talk to the daughter, and the daughter's like, I don't even have a boyfriend. So, yeah. So I would talk to the mom about how she's saying to her daughter, I don't trust you. So I can see why I can see the dilemma there. But again, because of the risks, and because of that notion of saying that you don't trust the daughter, I think that interferes in the relationship rather than helping it. So, so I think that, the thing that might come out of this, in some states at least, with the reversal of Roe versus Wade, is that, we may see more use of contraceptives. We may see more abstinence. We're definitely seeing more vasectomies, which scares me because of the STIs, and even the medical societies are not convinced that people can abstain from sex before marriage. It just is sickening. But I see patients that have not had sex.
Absolutely.
I see both. So it still happens.
Well,
It still
28-year-old
happens.
virgin speaking here, and hey, I'm not afraid to say that. It's okay. It's okay to be a 28-year-old virgin, waiting for the right person. It is possible. Is it easy, quote unquote? I don't know. As long as you're not going to those parties doing those things, it seems like it's easier than it could have been, right? So you have to sort of decide who you're affiliating with, but more importantly, you've got to keep your eye on what is that for, right? And that goes to the chair of philosophy. Is people need to understand that procreation does two things. It bonds you, right, to the other person. There's a hormonal chemical release, and you're permanently attached to that person. And people who are living in hookup culture, you have 10, 100, however many permanent chemical bonds in your brain. Wouldn't it be nice to just have one or two or not 20? Wouldn't it be nice to limit that down a little bit? Just a thought for you to consider. If the chair of politics has gotten their say in,
Well, yeah, to a degree.
To a degree?
To a degree.
If you got anything else you want to drop?
A lot of what you're talking about has a lot of good basis, John Arthur, because, in life, a lot of decisions have a lot to do with who you hang with, who you run around with.
That's true.
And that has a lot to influence in your life decisions, because those people can help influence the things and the decisions that you make in your life. Because, man, people that are making bad decisions can influence you in making bad decisions, and those that make good decisions in their lives can help you make good decisions in your life. And boy, I'll tell you, this is coming from someone who has made a lot of bad decisions and has hung around the wrong people growing up in their life.
So I know that you said abstinence is the best contraception. Do you want to respond a little bit to what Mr. Steve was just saying?
So yeah, I was thinking about also in the context of being a Christian, though, that you're if you're going to church and you're reading the Bible and you're around people that are trying to honor God and that are trying to practice what Jesus practiced, not only are you going to be you're going to be more satisfied and happier. Now, that doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen. That doesn't mean there's no mistakes that are going to be made. But God has a way of redeeming those even when we fail. Amen. So I agree with what you said about being in the right place really makes a big difference.
Yeah. Amen. And just to wrap up our time here, we do need to get going. We're getting close. I want to come from the chair of economics last round here. One of the things that people talk about when they talk about abortion and contraceptives is the financial burden that a child places on the parent. But I would suggest that that's actually a backwards way of looking at it. Because what do we see with the generation that had the most access to contraceptives? What's happening to the boomer generation as far as the tax structure? The people who should have been there to support mom and dad. You have a lot of boomers dying alone and in poverty, whereas just 150 years ago, it was expected that one of the kids would take mom and dad into their home and care for them in their old age. We've seen that kind of a shift. Is there a lack of value being placed on the family? And then also, I know you can unpack this in this large loaded question here. Does the idea of contraceptives potentially decrease the value of human life, or at least the human experience? I know our Catholic brothers and sisters would absolutely jump on that. There's a time and a place, right, for everything. And I would even say sometimes there's a time and place for contraceptives. But not having children has a long-term effect on you, doesn't it?
I think that our culture is much, yes, I think that our culture is so focused on having a good time now that they tend not to look at, like you were talking about legacy before, they tend not to look at that. You know, it's always, how can I be happy now? The future is hard to imagine for everybody. So I can say that, so I have 4 children and 7 grandchildren and another one soon. So,
Congratulations.
and it's a beautiful thing, and but I can't, when I got married, I didn't know how many kids I would have. I didn't know, what they would be like. None of us knows this. But yeah, when you start saying that, using contraception without much thought to the ultimate effects, especially outside of marriage, then I think you do devalue human life. You devalue our dignity. You devalue the sacredness that we know is there. And so I think knowing that God values us, being made in His image, is just something that it's hard to even comprehend. But He thinks we're special, and I guess we just see the now and tend to be very materialistic about it. And so that's the thing that fights against the temporal and the supernatural are always kind of fighting. Yeah.
Indeed. So make sure that your eyes are set heavenward and towards eternity, and not necessarily on the now. I'm not going to say that someone shouldn't be, using contraceptives. There's a time and a place, but understand what's happening, and understand what you're doing and what you could be doing with certain means and methods, and how dangerous some of them are. So I want to get everyone's last takeaway walking around the room. I want to get the chair of theology starting off with you. I'm sure you've got some thoughts just to close out the day.
I think it is a very controversial topic. My husband and I, we've made our decision. I have a very clear conscience about the decision we made. I mean, it wasn't an easy one. It was done in prayer. It was seeking, the will of the Lord. And I think we made the decision that God led us to make. And we have 5 kids. We have 10 grandchildren. I mean, we are fruitful.
That's good. You made a choice, and you prayed about it, and you certainly didn't leave this earth without a full quiver.
And I will tell you something, Charlie and I got married at 18 and 19. We never based having children on our financial means, because we always felt that the Lord would provide. That was never included in the decision.
In the words of the infamous Tucker Carlson, men, go get a job that you're not qualified for, get married, have lots of kids, and it'll work out. I mean, I'll quote him there. He's right. Moving over to the chair of philosophy. Grab that mic, pull it over to you. Yep.
So I was just going to say, with the people who are considering contraception, may I suggest that instead of being reactionary and going with these contraceptive options, I think what Dr. Flower has presented is by far the superior option, and that is abstinence and still maintaining purity, especially if you're not married. If you're not married, purity is always going to be the best way. And so don't be reactionary, be preventative.
Absolutely. Melissa?
I guess for me, we're not going to open up the can of worms on my former life, but it has, what you're talking about and all the health implications that can happen, if you do, contraceptive and go down that line. It's really opened my eyes on, as far as living a healthy life, what that can actually do to you.
something people need to know.
Yes.
Mr. Steve?
I've got 2 children of my own. In my second marriage, I married a woman that has 5 children. I've currently got 17 grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild. I would say that, like Miss Nikki pointed out, my quiver is quite full. And chances are it's going to get fuller.
And
It's a joyous thing. It's a wonderful thing.
It is so
That
wonderful.
is when you look at your family as your wealth, not your finances, it makes a whole difference in life.
Man, I'll tell you, when the holidays are about, Christmas, it's absolutely wonderful. Having them all around, oh my gosh, it's a fine time. Everybody around enjoying and eating and
Children are a
joyous.
joy.
They're a
Children
blessing.
are a joy.
Yes.
They're not an inconvenience.
as
Yes.
long as you're loving them, that includes
And
discipline.
grandchildren are,
Better yet.
yes, yeah.
But good disciplined children are a blessing. By the way, I know some of Dr. Flower's grandchildren. Actually, I've met, I think all of them. So up to date, subject to change. All of them joys. And I'm just going to say something. Don't make a mistake right now based on economics and end up old and alone and without a posterity to take care of you. That's not what kids are for, but I'm saying that is a blessing that kids give you. And Dr. Flower, I want to give you the final word of the day before we close out. What would you say to folks who are considering contraceptives in an unmarried situation and then also in a married?
So the only contraceptive I would recommend if you're not married is abstinence. By the way, that is still what we're teaching in Texas schools. I was even on one of the curriculum committees. So a contraception in marriage is an individual choice that you're going to have to pray about and decide what the best thing is for you and your spouse. And that's how it should be, because that's how you make healthy decisions and ones that are God-honoring. And when we honor God with our decisions, then I believe he blesses us. Amen
and amen. Thank you so much for being on the show again. We really appreciate it. It's
Thank
been
you.
lovely.
Enjoyed it.
With that said, if you enjoyed this podcast, like, comment, share, subscribe. We are still on the podcast. Those of you who are hopping over to YouTube, we are on YouTube. For those of you who are still listening to the audio only, we are branching out. Thank you so much for your listenership and your viewership. Make sure that if you didn't like this podcast, smash that dislike button twice. And go ahead and leave an angry comment. It does help with the algorithm. Love y'all so much. Thank you so much. Bye.
See you guys.
All right.
Bye.
All right. All right.
Yep.
Last thing. Going around the room. Your favorite thing about children. About half of us in here have had children and the other half have not. Still, I spent a lot of time around kids. I think y'all have too. What is your favorite thing about having kids in the house? And then your least favorite.
Well, that was always my dream was always to be a mother. So I've always loved being a mother and taking care of my children. It was very fulfilling. That's what people don't understand. There's an internal fulfilling thing that God gives you.
I think my favorite thing about children is just their learnability.
There's something special about pouring into a child.
I guess I don't have a kid, but helping with the preschool at the church, whenever they get to know you and they look at you with those eyes like, pick me up, love me, just have that look of, just, I don't know, it's hard to explain the look that they give you.
It's an image of how Christ looks at us, how God looks at us.
But then on the flip side, when they're crying and screaming their heads off, that's a totally other story.
Yep.
So the least fun is probably the fighting among themselves. And the most fun is just their laughter and their trust of mom or grandmom. Just the innocence that they're sharing and that innocent love that they give.
I would guess one of the least favorite things was, like Dr. Flower said, was the arguing and the fighting when we would have all 7 of them together. Oh my goodness. And one thing I would add on the least favorite thing was when the girls got to be teenagers and started to date. Oh my gosh, that was such a scary thing. And my favorite thing was when they got older and they got to a point to where they were all like eating like animals. I love to cook, okay? And I would cook so much food, it didn't matter how much I cooked. They ate it all, man. There would never be any around for me and my wife to eat. It was like she'd go, I thought you cooked extra. I did. I cooked extra, but it's like eat it all. They all gone, man.
That's some good stuff. My favorite part is spending one-on-one time and teaching and watching them learn. Kind of what Josh was alluding to. I love working with kids and I love watching them discover and learn. It's such a cool event. My least favorite moment of having kids in the house is the silence. And for those of you who have kids, you know what I mean. It's loud and then all of a sudden it's silent. And you go, what just broke? So,
What are they doing now?
Or who's hurt? What are they doing now? What's going on? With that said, tell us in the comment section down below, if you're still here, what is your favorite part of having kids in the house and your least favorite part? We love you all so much. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.